Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's Wednesday, the 16th of June. This is show number 146 since I started back in March last year. Got a fair amount of interesting news for you today. Paris is about to begin charging for all motorcycle parking. The e-scooter trial has now reached London. The DVSA are suffering from industrial action. I'll talk about the winners of the 24-hour race at Le Mans. Got a weather warning for you as thunderstorms are set to hit most of the UK. We'll have a quick look at Daimler's Reitwagen. It's the first internal combustion engined bike. And we'll also look at today's better biking talking point, which is to watch out for tractors. So settle yourself down, grab yourself a brew, and we'll be here for the next 25 minutes or so. I was going to quote a few lines from the Kaiser Chiefs. I predict a riot. Why would I be doing that? Well, it's just been announced that motorcycles and scooters will be charged for parking in Paris starting next year. That was announced by City Hall on Tuesday. Right now, the cost of parking a motorcycle would therefore be around €2 an hour in the city centre, which works out at about 16 to 20 euros a day, or up to €100 a week. The charge is less out in the provincial parts of the capital, €120 an hour. How many riders are likely to be affected by this move? Well, the newspaper Le Parisien estimates that there are 100,000 people who ride two-wheelers in Paris every day. And right now, the bad news is there are only 40,000 parking places. Now, okay, not every bike will be on the road at the same time, and not every bike will be trying to get into those parking bays simultaneously. But it does show that the first part of the problem. There's a significant shortfall in parking places. Now, the measures were part of a package announced by the Deputy Mayor, who is David Belliard, and he's a member of the Green Party. He said that around 5,000 dedicated parking spots for motorcycles and scooters would be added to those 40,000. And he also said that that the parking rates for two-wheelers is only half that charge to car owners. Now, Paris has banned pavement parking already some years ago, and there are further promises of more severe sanctions for offenders, because although it's banned, it still goes on. And the problem is then it's fairly clear that that leaves a huge shortfall of available parking spaces. So what's the solution? Well, Belliard proposes that the powered two-wheelers could actually use car parking spots. Now, given that one of the other measures that was announced at the same time was a cut by half of the car's 65,000 car parking spots in the capital, there's clearly not going to be enough parking to go round. And you can begin to imagine what's likely to happen. One of the things I can see is that irate drivers trying to find a parking space with a sort of scooter or something blocking the entire space will actually go around dragging these motorcycles and scooters out of the bays, or, in extreme cases, maybe even pushing them out. The car spaces, where are they going? Well, they're going to be turned into cycle paths, green areas and terraces, and wider pavements. It's not all bad news, as disabled motorists, car sharers, delivery workers and taxis will get more dedicated parking spaces than now. And electric vehicles, including e-scooters, will continue to park for free in the French capital, Belliard said. But you have to wonder how long that'll go on, because obviously as people switch away from petrol-driven vehicles, perhaps because they can't easily park them, and because it basically is costing too much, there will still be a pressure on the parking spaces. It doesn't mean there's a free-for-all parking these vehicles. They still have to use official bays. And of course, as soon as the income starts to be lost, if you think about 65,000 car parking spaces and €4 an hour for those spaces, that's a significant loss of income per day for the capital. So I can't see free parking forever going on for e-scooters and e-cars. Anyway, this is all an enactment of a measure that was announced by the Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo during her 2020 re-election campaign. And last month, as part of this traffic sort of freeing policy, she announced that most vehicles will actually be banned from the Paris centre districts. That includes the area around the island in the middle of the Seine, the name of which I have temporarily forgotten. Critics, of course, are blaming her anti-car policies for traffic headaches for residents, and people who live in the suburbs and who want to get into the centre of the city are saying there is a lack of viable public transport option. In common with London, which is also doing its best to make it difficult to get into the city centre by car or even by motorcycle, it's be interesting to see how the Parisians respond to this. Given that the French motorcyclists are notably more militant than English motorcyclists, I suspect that we'll very soon see some major demonstrations by French bikers, probably doing something like blocking the route périphérique. Yes, I predict a riot indeed. All right, okay, carrying on from that story, here in London, the e-scooter trial launched last week. Now, Lime is one of the 3 operators granted licenses by Transport for London, the others being Dot and Tier Mobility, neither of which I have heard of previously. Lime already provide electric bicycles. Now, the trial is a year long, and initially it will see the scooters appearing in just a number of places in London: Canary Wharf, the City of London, and the boroughs of Kensington and Chelsea, Ealing, Richmond and Hammersmith, and Fulham. Lime are bringing in 200 of their scooters initially, and they will end up being parked in either marked bays on wider pavements or in converted car parking spots. Now, currently, there are more than 40 UK towns and cities, which include Birmingham and Manchester already, taking part in the government's e-scooter trial. This was brought forward during the COVID crisis last year, thanks to a change in legislation which accelerated things massively. Now, the situation in London is rather more complicated than the other cities, say TfL, but they still claim that these e-vehicles are in fact a key part of the city's sustainable future and pandemic recovery. However, the trials aren't going without hitches, and there are concerns here and in other countries, of course, about safety. There have been some serious and even fatal accidents involving licensed e-scooters, not in the UK. I don't think there have been any fatals in the UK, but there certainly have been abroad. There are also concerns about the scooters being abandoned and causing street clutter and a trip hazard. And that's a major problem that's been caused by the electric bicycle hire schemes, where the bikes can be picked up from anywhere, but then are dropped off wherever you want to cycle to. Certainly the streets, even residential streets like where I'm living at the moment in northwest London, you do come out and find a bike just lying on its side in the middle of the pavement. Somebody's just literally just dropped it there. The trip hazard problem is supposed to be addressed by the need to return these scooters to specific parking bays. Now, I can see some problems with that. The first one is, depending on how close and how many of these bays there actually are, if they're not close to where you start from and where you finish, then people aren't going to want to use them. There's no point in walking for half a mile to get to a scooter to cycle or scoot for half a mile and then have to walk another half mile to work. It's just not going to happen. And what happens if you don't return to obey isn't clear in the press release. I haven't read up terms and conditions, but my guess is that probably either the meter keeps ticking until you hit a maximum charge, or there is a financial penalty for simply abandoning the scooter. There's also a very obvious problem in London, and that's you could only use them within the designated boroughs. So what happens if you live or work and you want to scoot into an adjacent borough? Well, the trial zone is ring fenced by a GPS tracker. So basically what happens is, as soon as you trundle into a piece of road which belongs to a different borough and you're out of your territory, the scooter cuts out. Now, given the weird shape of a lot of London boroughs, if you look at the map, you'll see exactly what I mean. I can see this being an all too common occurrence when people don't realise they're actually crossing a borough boundary. So I do wonder if Lime and the other operators are providing maps to users or some kind of route planning which allows you to ride around some of the sort of inconvenient protuberances from the wrong borough. The cost of these things is also significant too. The scooters will cost £1 to unlock in the first place, and then 16p per minute. Now that works out at £9.60 an hour. That's double the minimum wage for the under 18s. So I imagine the other operators will be charging similar rates. Now, the sight of unlicensed e-scooters is a common sight on London's roads at the moment, and it's hard to see how Simon Ovens from the Metropolitan Police Road and Transport Policing Command can claim that the illegal bikes are absolute death traps, but the rental companies can argue that their bikes are perfectly safe. I know that they have addressed some of the issues from the non-licensed bikes by giving them bigger wheels and better suspension. And for London too, they're also getting a lower top speed of 12.5 miles per hour. And they claim that with the better brakes that these bikes are also equipped with, you get a 2-meter stopping distance. Well, I should hope so, actually. From 12.5 miles an hour on my bicycle, I can stop in about a foot. So I would certainly hope you can stop in 2 meters. So that's a 3 mile per hour reduction on other trials. So what are the good points? Well, the proponents of e-scooters say that they appeal to a wider demographic than cycling, including more women and younger men. Lorna Stevenson, who is an e-scooter researcher at the Active Travel Academy at the University of Westminster, says, "We're seeing a cultural thing where for some communities bikes aren't aspirational, but because of their newness and innovation, e-scooters are seen as cool. They're also smaller, easier to store, and you can pick them up and carry them upstairs as well, which deposit them in a corner of the office, which is something you obviously can't do with a full-size bicycle." But there is a rather bizarre twist to this. In theory, you could have a full license for a car or a motorcycle and be unable to rent one because the age limit is set at 18. And you need to be able to upload your driver's license to actually get access to the app to unlock one in the first place. And of course, there's an irony here as well. The point of requiring a driving license in a city that's actually trying to reduce car use. Now, it's an increasingly common fact of life in urban areas that many people are not bothering to get car licenses. It's particularly the younger generation. Many of them just simply haven't bothered to spend the hundreds of pounds to learn to drive a car, which they probably won't be using. Anyway, at least the hire companies do cover insurance in their fees. The scheme could be extended to other boroughs later in this year. Southwark and Lambeth are already showing interest. Right. Don't forget, if you have a comment on any of these stories, please drop me a line. I'm happy to read anything out. Mike Roberts has just actually put up an e-scooter fatal crash there with a link to it. So you can have a look at that if you want to. That's not one I'd heard of. So I don't know whether that's a licensed one or an unlicensed one, Mike. I'll try and find that out later. If you've got any ideas for future features on the show, I'm also more than happy to hear them. So do drop me a line and let me know what you think. DVLA, they're probably not one of the organisations that most people like dealing with. But if you've been struggling to reach them this week, that's because industrial action is taking place. It started on Monday. I only got the alert Tuesday, but it's due to last right through till Friday the 18th. And it directly affects their services, and they are particularly warning of delays in processing paper applications. So what the DVLA are asking is that if you are waiting for a license to come back, don't phone them up to chase it up. They say they are dealing with all paper applications as quickly as possible and in the order that they are received. If you do need to get hold of them during this time, the answer, they say, is to go to their online service, which is here. I'm just going to put that up in the comment box. There we go. It should go up any second. There we are. So have a look there if you need to contact the DVLA. Right, okay, so you probably remember, if you were watching on Sunday, that I was right at the end of watching the 24-hour Le Mans race coverage. I had to switch off just before the finish to get the show ready. It was in glorious weather, since it was held at a later time in the year than normal. Normally it's sort of in April sometime, and as I said on Sunday, I've spent far too many days wrapped in waterproofs all day, or even freezing to death as it's frost came down overnight. So it was lovely to see it being held in glorious early summer weather, and I would have loved to have been there myself. The race was actually won by the defending champions. That's the Yoshimura SERT Suzuki, and they came in a fairly comfortable 8 laps ahead of the WeBike SRC Kawasaki France Trickstar Kawasaki. And they, in turn, led the BMW Motorrad World Endurance Team across the line by a further 5 laps. The BMW came back from some electrical problems, incidentally, so they did actually pretty well to get up to 3rd place. The first Superstock bike over the line was also the first Honda. That was National Motos, and they finished an excellent 5th overall. Just in case you're wondering, the difference between the Superstock bikes and the full-on endurance bikes is largely in what they're allowed to do to the bikes. The Superstock bikes are basically showroom machines with some fairly minor modifications, like exhausts, for example. The full endurance teams have some very trick parts indeed, including things like quickly detachable calipers, which allow them a brake pad change to be done by actually swapping the caliper. There's a sort of very clever interrupter in the hydraulic line, which is a dry connection. So basically what they do is just unbolt the caliper, pull it off, and they literally break the hydraulic line in two with this dry connection, then plug it back together when they put the next caliper on. So they can do a brake pad change in literally just a few seconds. The SERT Suzuki was actually dominant. It led for most of the race, 819 laps out of 855, but they were pushed hard by the Yamaha official Endurance World Championship team. But that duel did end prematurely, with the Yamaha returning to the pits early in the night, puffing clouds of smoke from the exhaust. When the coverage went back to the pits a few minutes later, they'd already got the engine out of the frame and the head was lifted. So it was fairly clear that the race was over for them at that point. It turned out later that a valve had gone. So if you want to catch the next event, it's a 12-hour race. It's at Estoril. It's the second race of the season in Portugal, and it's on Saturday the 17th of July, and Eurosport will be covering it. If you're enjoying the fine weather out there, then make the most of it today, because the second half of the week looks rather lively, because it's that time of year again when the sun's at its highest in the sky and the air's still relatively cool as it comes across the country, and the result is thunderstorms. And so there are weather warnings out for quite a few areas of the country, with thunderstorms expected to move right over the UK. They're coming northeast across parts of England and Wales from late this evening through till Friday morning. So that's a fairly extensive period of thundery rain. The forecast is that there could be intense with torrential rain, hail, frequent lightning and strong gusty winds, which is something you often experience around thunderstorms. And of course, localized heavy rain could cause some flooded roads. And then, if that wasn't enough, a second area of thundery rain is expected to push north across England and East Wales through Friday morning. And that's likely to persist right through the day before clearing early on Saturday. Now, the forecast is a bit less certain for that particular burst of storms. It's a little bit further off, so not quite so easy to predict, but same general problems are likely to occur: torrential rain and flooding, hail and lightning, but they should be gone into the North Sea by Saturday morning. But remember this: if you're out for a ride on Saturday morning, even though the storm has passed, watch out for flooded patches of road in dips and depressions, and particularly at this time of the year, watch out for debris under trees. Don't forget, if there are strong winds, they can bring down big branches, because this time of year they're covered in leaves. So, okay, what is this, you may be wondering? Well, it's actually the Daimler Reitwagen. It was built in 1885. Its creator was Gottlieb Daimler, who's often termed the father of the motorcycle. It's the first gasoline-powered internal combustion engine. You'll see that it's still a fairly primitive-looking device. There's sort of a belt drive to the rear, but the rider is actually sitting on top of the engine itself, and it has a wooden frame, and interestingly it has sort of outrigger wheels to keep it upright. So it probably wasn't the most comfortable thing in the world to ride, but it does deserve that place in history as putting the first internal combustion engine into what became the motorcycle. So, okay, just to round off the show today with our better biking piece, I was actually pleased to see that the Ulster Farmers Union a few weeks ago put out a reminder to farmers to be extremely careful when driving tractors and agricultural equipment around the roads, and that they asked them to be particularly mindful of cyclists and motorbike riders when using public roads, and that included being careful not to spread mud and other debris which can cause a slippery surface, and of course that's made worse after the rainfall, so that's something else to watch out for after some thunderstorms. Now, obviously farmers are out and about with various seasonal jobs at this time of year, so there are more agricultural vehicles around than there may be at other times. But drivers are also, of course, reminded that motorcyclists themselves and cyclists will be taking advantage of fine weather and the shorter nights to do rides in the evening. And Jennifer Hawkes, who's the Ulster Farmers Union Rural Affairs Chair, said farmers will be coming in out of fields onto public roads very often. It is important they keep an eye open for bikes and muck or debris that's fallen from their tractor or equipment, and we would ask them to keep the road clear. Farm safety is a major issue within the farming community, but it stretches beyond the farm gate. Our roads can be a very dangerous place if extra caution and consideration for others is not applied. It's important that all road users work together, acting responsibly, and look out for one another when driving. Martin Boyd, the Northern Ireland regional representative of the Motorcycle Action Group UK and a regular visitor to my Facebook page, by the way, said MAG welcomes the valued consideration of the UFU and support from its members to help improve safety for motorcyclists. But I will come back to that point about it being a piece of teamwork here, and that whilst farmers need to look out for two-wheelers, we also need to be on the alert for farm vehicles and the kind of problems they can cause us. basically on two wheels, we're far too vulnerable to leave it entirely to the tractor driver to look after our safety. And unfortunately, if you may recall, in a show not that long ago, I actually reported on a serious collision that happened a couple of years earlier. Which involved a rider who was overtaking a stream of traffic. And the reason the stream of traffic was all moving slowly and he had what seemed to be a nice, easy overtake was there was a tractor at the front of the queue. And the tractor turned right just as he was passing it. So he was lucky to get away with serious injuries rather than being killed, I suppose. But it's all too common an error. And I have to be honest, it's one that I have made in the dim, distant past. But these days, I am a lot more cautious looking out for agricultural vehicles in the first place, and I'm certainly very, very cautious when I pass them. I don't see them just as a slow-moving vehicle to blast past. I do look very, very carefully to see where they might be going before I commit myself. Now, the system I like to use when I'm riding is based on the Motorcycle Safety Foundation's approach. That's a US rider organization, and it's basically search, evaluate, execute. Now, it's the perfect expression of what actually a system should be. We input data at one end, we process the data in the middle bit, and then out the other end come the outputs, which are what we're going to do next. So the system's probably worth a talking point on their own, and maybe I'll pop that into another show in the near future. But it brings me back to a point from 2014. I actually wrote a Tips on Tuesday piece called Combine the Clues, Tractor Time Again. You probably saw what I did there. It's still out on Facebook, of course, although it'll take a bit of digging out. But if you want to track it down in an easier way, you can become a supporter over on my Ko-fi page, and you can find it there. As I said, it's in the 2014 section. But I'll give you an abbreviated version of what it was all about anyway. Just to start, I was talking about the usual stuff whilst I was running a training course over in France some years ago, and I was delivering a commentary ride. So I was talking about things like the road bends right, out of sight, assess surface, check mirrors, apply brakes, shift gears, position to avoid gravel, move out for the entrance on the right, set up for the left-hander, check mirrors, set throttle, all that kind of stuff. And I added, and we're going to meet a tractor in about half a mile or so, so we'll ease off speed. A few minutes later, we stopped to have a chat about what I'd been talking about, and the trainee said something along the lines of, when you said it, I could see what you were seeing, although you see a lot earlier than I do, and you see more detail. So he said that was really helpful to help him improve his observation. But he said, one thing what puzzles me, how did you know there was a tractor ahead? When you mentioned it, I was looking everywhere, but I couldn't see it till we came round the bend. Did you order it specially to be there? Well, I had to have a chuckle at that because I hadn't, but what I had done is I'd spotted a yellow flashing light over the top of the bank on that left-hander. Now, given the time of year, and given the fact we were in the middle of a rural area, and given the fact there were fields being attacked by machinery sort of either side of the road in the general area, I guessed it would be a farm vehicle of some sort, probably a tractor. So what other clues might we see? Well, if you see a flashing amber light, that's a very, very good one. It might be in a field, but it might be on the road. So look for anything else, dust or mud leading onto the road and back off it again. It might be into a farmyard, it might be into a field. But if there's nothing turning out where you see it, but it's going in your direction, then what's at the other end? You may encounter a tractor or something pulling out of a field or a farmyard at the other end of that sort of patch of mud or dust. Something else to think about is that modern tractors are pretty damn wide, and one of the things that has changed dramatically is that they now have a sort of road gearing, and that means they can get a surprising shift on, and they often do. So it's a good idea to remember that before riding around a bend at speed on a narrowish road. You might be planning to stop by the point at which you can see the road vanishing, the limit point, but if a tractor and trailer comes around the corner and it's taking up most of the road, and the driver is going a little bit quick, you will have to stop pretty damn sharpish. So actually setting your speed to somewhat less than the limit point is actually a very, very good idea. What else was I going to say? Something else to think about, as I said, when following a tractor, is bear in mind they probably won't be going far along the road before they turn off again, and it may happen quite suddenly. So it's worth looking at the road surface for any hints where that tractor might be going. Have a look if you see farm buildings in the distance, then that could well be where the tractor's going to turn in. And don't forget that if a vehicle is pulling out, it's probably got a trailer on it, and that means it will take quite a while to get out through a gate. So don't just assume that it's a tractor on its own and aim to pass behind the tractor, because you may not avoid the trailer behind it. Get some speed off and be ready to come to a complete stop. When there is a trailer attached to a tractor, it may obscure mirror views as well. It may obscure indicators on the tractor, and it's although this should work, I wouldn't always rely on trailers having operating indicators. Combines will be out again in the not too distant future. The first wheat fields, usually down in this part of the world, somewhere around about the 3rd week in July, are ready to be cut down. So have a think about that. What clues have you got that there are combines on the road? Well, have a look for dust. If you see clouds of dust over a hedgerow, that's a pretty good clue that there's probably farm machinery operating in that field. I remember several years ago, a rider was actually killed. It was what happened on one of, I can't remember, it was talked about on one of the road safety events I did by a policeman who investigated the crash, and the only conclusion that they came to was that the rider rode into a cloud of dust from a combine that was drifting across the road and completely failed to see the tractor that was actually in the dust storm. So bear that in mind. You may see straw or grain at the side of the road. Again, that is dropped, and it will be dropped recently by a tractor. The wind will blow the straw away, and the birds will see to the grain very quickly indeed, so it must be recent. There's often a stream of tractors and trailers shuttling back and forth. So if you see one, expect another, and expect them to be working late into the night as well. Many crops are now cut by contractors, and they'll use all the daylight hours and even nighttime. They'll be working under headlights during dry spells just to get the crops in as quickly as they can. So, just because it's getting dark doesn't mean activity around fields will have stopped. So that means they can be moving at odd hours as well. I've certainly encountered a combine harvester moving at about 1 o'clock in the morning, which you'd think is way after the time that you'd expect to see one. Now, in theory, beyond a certain width, vehicles like combines should have an escort vehicle with a flashing amber light. In practice, they may move unescorted for short distances on remote roads. A few years ago, I was running a training course in Wales. I'd finished a little bit earlier. I was taking a scenic route back across the Wye Valley area, and I met a combine coming down the hill on a road where you'd swear it was actually too narrow for the combine to get down. But there it was, coming around the corner, coming down the road at a fair old clip as well, and there was absolutely no way past it. So there was a steep bank on the right, which meant the combine couldn't pull away from me. There was a sheer drop into the River Wye on my left, and that left me a couple of feet of sort of gravel right on the edge of the drop to get onto and get out the way of the combine, which was going far too fast to stop. Fortunately, I made it because I wasn't going too fast. So something else to think about as well. We know it's going to rain over the next few days, so watch out for mud, which will be carted out by any vehicles. There's nothing much that farmers can do about that when it rains. So be cautious. If the road looks clear, don't expect it to be clear just around the corner. And of course, the other thing that can happen is that really remote rural roads can actually run straight through farm yards, so they can be absolutely covered there in mud or other slippery materials. So keep an eye open if you've got a farmhouse on one side and outbuildings on the other for a really messy road surface. So basically, what am I saying here? Well, our ability to predict what happens next isn't actually a particularly difficult skill to master. A bit of training helps. But mostly it depends on our willingness to actually go looking for the clues and then to use our imagination to figure out what could go wrong rather than what should go right. So, everything I've talked about here, you probably think, well, shouldn't happen in a well-ordered world, but the reality is that it does. So remember, search, evaluate, then execute. And a final point, if you want to get a training course to deal with something along these lines, then there is always something that I can offer you with survival skills. We do have the on-road training sessions, of course, where we go out and we can explore particular hazards like this. But the joy of Zoom and other online media is that I can give you much the same benefit without riding the bike. You can do it from the comfort of your own armchair via an inexpensive online coaching session. So do consider that. You can learn a lot about riding without actually leaving your armchair. All right, okay, so that's the end of today's show. Don't forget, I have mentioned it already, you can get the article that I was talking about over on my Ko-fi page. It's there. There is an index on there. You'll have to dig around a little bit to find it. They haven't actually quite got the indexing sorted out nicely yet, but there is an index page. 2014 will take you to the tractor article, but there are around about 500 other articles now for you to read, and I'm still putting new ones up. I'll put some new ones up probably tomorrow. And there is the YouTube channel if you want a video. I have got a video there of actually a tractor and trailer pulling straight out of a side road in front of me if you go back through my YouTube channel, which you'll find there. So Survival Skills UK is the YouTube channel. Anything else to say? That's pretty much it for today. So thank you for looking in. Stay safe out there. Stay dry if you are out over the next few days. And if you're out after the rain has gone, remember all the problems that we've just talked about. Hope to see you again on Sunday. That show may be recorded. I'm still mulling over whether I need to do that, and I'll explain more on Sunday. Thanks for looking in. Bye for now.